Every industry loves an adoption curve until the invoice arrives. For the last 2 years, AI tools were sold as a kind of ambient productivity upgrade. Add Copilot, add Gemini, add an agent. Let the work accelerate. But this weekend's AI news has a different shape. Developers are arguing about token bills. Researchers say coders no longer want to work without AI. Infrastructure startups are raising around inference, not just training. Microsoft is smoothing Copilot's interface. Google is testing an always-on assistant for ordinary work. The theme is simple. AI is moving from demo magic to metered infrastructure. I'm David Carver. This is The Synthetic Lens. Marcus Chen is here on the developer story. Marcus, the cleanest example is GitHub Copilot. What changed?
The mechanism is billing. TechCrunch reports that GitHub Copilot is moving toward token-based usage on June 1st. That means the cost is no longer just a flat subscription sitting quietly on an expense report. It starts looking more like cloud compute. How much model work did you actually burn? And developers noticed fast. TechCrunch cites users on Reddit and X describing projected jumps from $29 a month to hundreds, even thousands, depending on how heavily they use it. Some of those examples may be edge cases. Token accounting can also punish sloppy workflows, but that is the point. The tool is now important enough that usage discipline matters.
So this is less about one price increase and more about AI coding becoming a resource meter.
Exactly. If you treat the model like an infinite intern, the bill starts behaving like an infinite intern with a corporate card. Teams will need cost controls, prompt discipline, routing, caching, maybe internal guidance on when to use a frontier coding model versus a cheaper, local, or smaller model. The awkward part is that this arrives at the same time developers are becoming dependent on the tools. TechCrunch also points to METR's difficulty rerunning part of an AI productivity study because developers did not want to work without AI, even for limited tasks. That is a real shift. The question is no longer, will engineers use AI? They are using it. The question is whether organizations understand the cost and quality trade-offs of that dependence.
Let me narrow that slightly. Dependence is not automatically failure.
Right. A compiler is a dependency. A cloud provider is a dependency. Search is a dependency. The difference is observability. With code assistance, teams often know the subscription price, but they may not know the review burden, the security burden, the debugging burden, or the token burn per useful change.
Host Ingrid Halvorsen. This sounds like a procurement story pretending to be a productivity story.
It is very much a procurement story. The first phase was adoption by enthusiasm. A manager could buy seats and claim the organization was becoming AI native. The next phase is cost allocation. Which team is consuming the tokens? Which work actually improved? Which department gets charged for exploratory usage? Who has permission to run expensive models on low-value tasks? Microsoft's Copilot redesign fits here. The Verge reports Microsoft is rolling out a cleaner Microsoft 365 Copilot interface that it says loads twice as fast, with more structured responses and progressive disclosure. That sounds cosmetic, but enterprise adoption often turns on exactly this kind of detail. If a tool is slow, cluttered, or unpredictable, workers avoid it. If it is fast and embedded where the work already happens, the usage curve rises. Then finance asks why the bill rose with it.
Useful software creates its own budget problem.
Often. And the winners in enterprise AI may not be the companies with the flashiest demos. They may be the ones that make usage legible. Administrators want controls. Finance wants predictability. Legal wants retention policies. Security wants audit trails. Workers want the thing to load quickly and not make them learn a new operating system. That is why the Copilot redesign matters more than it looks. It is Microsoft trying to make AI feel less like a side experiment and more like a normal layer of office work. Once that happens, AI stops being a pilot and starts being overhead.
Marcus, on the infrastructure side, Groq is a useful signal. What does that story tell us?
TechCrunch, citing Axios, says Groq is looking to raise $650 million from existing investors as it leans into an inference-cloud business built around its own chips and systems. The important word is inference. Training is the dramatic part of AI. Inference is the daily bill. Every prompt, autocomplete, spreadsheet summary, support ticket draft, coding session, and agent task turns into inference demand.
if Gemini Spark is running in the cloud while your laptop is closed, if Copilot is active all day. If Microsoft embeds Copilot across Office, someone has to serve those tokens at scale.
So Groq is not a side plot.
No. It is part of the economic plumbing. The industry has spent years talking about model capability. The next fight is cost per useful token, latency, reliability, and whether specialized inference providers can compete with the hyperscalers. If the AI layer is metered infrastructure, inference is the meter room.
James Okafor, I want to bring you in because the OpenAI stories this week point in a more serious direction. OpenAI announced Rosalind Biodefense and a frontier governance framework. How do those fit this broader shift?
They show the same transition from capability to operating model. OpenAI says Rosalind Biodefense is meant to give vetted developers and select U.S. government and allied partners access to GPT Rosalind for public health, biodefense, and pandemic preparedness. That is not a consumer chatbot story. It is controlled access to frontier capability for a sensitive domain.
Your confidence level.
High on the direction, careful on the result. Publishing a framework is not the same as proving governance works, but the direction is clear. Frontier AI companies are being pushed to behave less like product labs and more like operators of critical infrastructure. Sensitive access programs, incident processes, risk taxonomies, external evaluation. That is the vocabulary of infrastructure.
There is a consumer version of that too. Google's Gemini Spark is being tested as an always-on assistant. TechCrunch's hands-on says it can work across Gmail, Calendar, Docs, Sheets, and Slides. Marcus, what should we make of it?
Spark is Google saying the personal agent should run in the cloud, not on your open laptop. The review says it is genuinely useful for work-adjacent tasks. Inbox summaries, calendar-driven priorities, personal expense spreadsheets, local planning. But it also sounds like Google is still searching for the killer use case. Technically, that is an important middle stage. It does not need to be perfect to matter. It needs to teach users that an agent can keep working when they are not staring at it. That changes expectations. Once people expect persistent agents, the infrastructure burden becomes permanent.
And that burden is not only technical. If Spark reads your inbox and calendar to generate tasks, the value comes from access to private context. The business model has to pay for compute, but the trust model has to pay for permission.
That connects to the Meta hardware story. TechCrunch says Meta is reportedly developing an AI pendant, building partly on its Limitless acquisition and also considering expanded AI glasses and a wearables for work subscription. Is that the same infrastructure story, wearing a camera?
Yes, with a sharper privacy edge. If enterprise AI lives in documents and calendars, wearable AI wants meetings, conversations, movement, and ambient context. That can be useful. It can also become a surveillance product very quickly.
I would narrow that. The risk depends on defaults: recording, retention, employee consent, bystander consent, administrative access, and whether the device can be compelled or subpoenaed. A pendant is not just hardware. It is an evidence collector if the governance is weak.
The Verge had an even more literal data story. A startup offering to clean homes for free in exchange for robot training footage.
Shift. The idea is simple. You get a cleaner, they get data. The cleaner wears recording hardware while doing chores, and that footage trains future robots. It is almost too neat as a symbol. The mess in your kitchen becomes supervised data. The awkward hat becomes the sensor platform. For robotics, this makes sense. Real-world household manipulation is hard because homes are chaotic. Cabinets vary, lighting varies, objects are weird, people leave shoes, cables, pets, dishes, and laundry everywhere. Simulation helps, but real footage is still valuable.
It also makes the consent problem concrete. A home is not a lab. It contains documents, children, visitors, medicine, screens, addresses, habits. Blurring names and faces helps, but it is not a complete answer. The more valuable the data, the more carefully the collection has to be governed.
NVIDIA's robotics research gives the technical side of that. It highlighted ICRO work on simulation to real transfer, multi-arm planning, robot navigation, grasping novel objects, and vision language action systems. One project, Schedule Stream, reports a 3-time speed-up in multi-arm planning. Another, Compass, reports about 80% success across real-world navigation trials after training and simulation. Grasp MPC reports roughly 75% success on real robots for novel object grasping, compared with 41% for a baseline.
Those numbers are why the home data story matters. Robotics is moving from choreographed demos towards systems that need to generalize. NVIDIA's point is that simulation to real is becoming the bridge, but the bridge still needs real-world validation, and everyone is looking for cheaper ways to get it.
So put the pieces together. Copilot pricing says AI work has a meter. Developer behavior says the tools are becoming hard to give up. Groq says inference is a market. Microsoft says interface polish drives workplace adoption. Gemini Spark says agents will run while we sleep. Meta and Shift say the next context layer may be the physical world. OpenAI's governance work says the most sensitive domains need access controls and regulatory alignment. Ingrid, what is the business lesson?
The free lunch was never free. It was subsidized by capital, strategic pricing, and a race to change behavior before users saw the full cost. Now, the cost is becoming visible. That does not mean AI adoption slows dramatically. It means buyers start asking harder questions. What is the task? What model is necessary? What risk attaches? And who pays when the agent keeps working after everyone has gone home?
James, the risk lesson?
Treat AI like infrastructure before it forces you to. Meter it, audit it, define access, decide what data it can touch, decide what it can remember, decide who is responsible when it acts. The dangerous phase is when organizations depend on a system before they govern.
Marcus, the technical lesson?
Cost per useful outcome beats raw capability. If a model writes code that takes hours to review, the useful output is lower than the token count suggests. If an agent saves 5 minutes but burns expensive inference all day, the economics get weird. The metric that matters is not how magical the demo looked. It is whether the system produces reliable work at a cost the organization can understand.
That is the turn. AI is still getting more capable, but capability is no longer the whole story. The industry is entering the accounting phase. Tokens, inference, latency, audit logs, workplace controls, sensor data, and risk frameworks. The magic trick is becoming a utility bill. For the Synthetic Lens, I'm David Carver.